name is Dan Shepard. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Education here with Missouri Western State University. And our topic for today, as you can see here, is do they care what you wear? Now right now I'm dressed a certain way, and this is the way that I might dress when I teach in class, but this is not the way that I dress when I am most comfortable in life. We'll talk more about that in just a moment, but my primary research question was, if I'm more comfortable at home choosing to wear my gym shorts and t-shirt, and if my students don't really care what I wear when I'm presenting face-to-face with them, then why don't I just be more comfortable at work? Now, when I spoke with students informally about this, they would always say to me, Dr. Shepard, we don't care. If you'd be more comfortable in a nice t-shirt, maybe that says Kansas City Chiefs or Missouri Western State University on it, and a comfortable pair of gym shorts, we wouldn't mind at all. You do that. But I thought there might be something more behind the surface. I thought there might be something that they weren't telling me. And so, more for my own curiosity than for any research project, I went ahead and surveyed about 100 of the students in our department. And I asked them, if you saw a professor dressed in a certain style of clothing, and I provided a picture of what that would be, how would you respond to them as a teacher? Would you find them more professional or less professional? Would you find them more skilled in teaching or less skilled in teaching? Would it foster your learning or would it hinder your learning? And so I surveyed 92 students within our department, and they were asked these Likert-style questions, and about 74% of them gave answers to my questions. The purpose of this presentation today is to take a look at the results of that to see if there's anything we can learn about whether or not, as the title of our session says, do they care what you wear? Before we get into the actual survey results, we're going to focus a little bit on what some research into this area has already told us. You know, I was surprised when I started putting this together as a journal article that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of studies already done on this topic. In fact, as I got into it, I thought, I have nothing to add to this literature because there's just so much of it out there. Again, with the hundreds of articles that I could provide for you, I'm just going to pick 4 or 5 just to sort of give you a general sense of what the research is telling us about professor clothing during teaching times. Let's go back to 2010, the researcher by the name of Carr. And what Carr told us was that in a large-scale study, that the better you dress, the more students themselves value what it is that you're teaching. For some reason, we make this connection in our head that if you look a certain way, then what you have to say has more merit, more meaning, more value. Now again, remember, my primary goal was to figure out a way to be more comfortable while I'm teaching. Carr would tell me that comfortability is not the goal, but looking a certain way so that students value what you have to say. Castor in 2013 found similar kinds of findings. What he found was that students want their teachers to dress better than they do because they want their teachers to model excellence for them. Interestingly, your students are looking at you and they're saying to themselves, someday I want to become better than I am today. Someday I want to become like you. And so when you look better, it enables them to have a vision of themselves in the future that's one that's maybe a little bit more positive, maybe one that's a little bit more than what they currently are. Now, not all of the research said exactly the same thing. I found this particular study to be interesting. In 2014, Balazza found that teachers, professors, instructors who wear non-conforming attire can lead to these sort of positive inferences of higher status and competence. The idea is that if you are so confident in who you are that you're willing to break sort of social expectations related to clothing, students tend to think, there must be something special about you. There must be something unique about you. There must be something wonderful about you that I should pay attention to. So again, most of the research tells us the better we dress, the better students respond, but in this particular study, we hear something slightly different, shaded slightly differently, and we're told that if we're non-conforming, students will look at us in a way that is not necessarily negative. And then one of the primary researchers in this area, an individual by the name of Garung, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, found in 2017 that when professors dress appropriately, their students will rate their courses as though the professor had higher intelligence, higher competence, and higher efficiencies. Now, friends, I will say this to you. If you find some of these things to be offensive, you don't like the topic, you don't believe in the topic, I'm certainly not trying to convince you of anything other than to say that your students are watching. Your students are noticing, and they're associating your style of clothing with certain things about you that may or may not be true. In this case, that you're smarter, that you're more competent, that you're more efficient. And then the same researcher in 2014 said that student presenters themselves were rated higher by their peers when they wore business formal clothing or business casual clothing. So they aren't just holding us to a higher standard, they're holding themselves to a higher standard as well. They want presenters in a classroom to look a certain way. Now that's just a basic research foundation for you. Let's go ahead now and take a look at the results of my own study of approximately 100 Missouri Western students in the education department. Now you might be wondering why I'm dressed this way for this slide, but I just wanted to give you an example of the kinds of questions I was asking myself. If your professor came to class dressed like this, would it have any kind of an impact on your learning? Would it be positive? Would it be negative? Would it have no change at all? Now again, in my own life, if it had no difference, if it made no difference on the instructional quality or the way that the instruction was received by students, this is exactly the way that I would dress every day while teaching my class. Well, unfortunately, students don't want to see this. Again, if you were just to ask them, do you care? They're going to tell you they don't care because they don't think that they do. But when we survey them and ask them specific questions about how they'll respond, the results tend to be fairly negative. Now on the survey, this is the picture that students were shown. This is a young man dressed very casually. T-shirts, pair of cargo shorts, pair of Chuck Taylors. Now, I think the young man looks amazing. He looks wonderful. He looks glorious in every way. But is this what students want to see when their professor is actually teaching? Well, here's what we asked them. I asked them, would it have a positive or negative effect on your learning? Agree, disagree, strongly disagree. Would you perceive this individual to be a professional, a person who should be respected, an individual who knows what he's doing? And then finally, would you find this individual approachable? In other words, would it help foster a positive relationship between the two of you? So again, does it impact your learning? Do you perceive that the person is competent? And do you perceive that the person is friendly? Someone that you would like to have a relationship with? Now, I won't go through all of these numbers, but I will point this out to you. Notice that 60% of the students disagree with the statement that this individual is a professional individual. About 60% of the students would say that if you show up like this to class, they automatically have an idea that you have a lack of ability or competence to do the job. Now, obviously, what I don't know is if you show up this way every day and you are amazing and you are professional and you are competent, that number obviously would change. But on the first day of class, when they walk in and they don't know you and you don't know them, and this is what they see, 60% of them are already making judgments about you that maybe, just maybe, you can't do the job well. Well, I asked the same question, only I changed it slightly, and this time you'll notice that our picture is female. Now, nowhere in the question did it say anything about male or female. I don't believe that it said anything about he or she. The image was simply clearly one that is female. And I asked the exact same questions. If your professor were dressed like this to teach, t-shirt, shorts comparable to cargo shorts, shoes comparable to Chuck Taylors, although in this case they are sandals, how would that make you feel about your own learning in class? How would that make you feel about the professor's professionalism or perceived competence? And how would that make you feel about his or her friendliness. Well, ladies, I've got good news for you if you're watching this video. Your students, remember that when we asked the same question about men, about 60% of them said that is not a professional look. But in this case, that number drops to about a third. Again, I don't know that I would recommend it, but there is good news here for those of you that are female instructors. Only about a third of your students, when you dress this way, will perceive you to have a lack of professionalism. Well, now you've noticed that we've changed the clothing just a little bit differently. We've gone from gym shorts to a pair of jeans. These particular jeans are a little bit torn, a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more well-worn. And of course, I'm wearing another t-shirt, maybe one slightly nicer than the one I had on a moment ago. This picture that the students were shown is seen here again, blue jeans, pair of sneakers, and then a nice t-shirt. Certainly not unstylish, but not dressed up as well. I referred to this on the survey as being casually dressed. Again, we had the same 3 questions for our 100 students. Would this style of clothing have any impact on your learning? Would this style of clothing have any impact on the perceived professionalism of the professor? And would this style of clothing be approachable? Would you find the professor to be friendly, congenial, someone that you'd like to get to know, someone that you would perceive would be someone that is a relationship builder with you? Those were our 3 questions, and you can see our results here. Perhaps you've been peeking at them already. Just one number I'd like to highlight for you. If one of your goals in class is to really foster a warm and friendly relationship with students, then this might be a style that you should consider. Notice that 2/3 of the students that were surveyed, 2 in every 3 said, if this were my professor, then I would be more open to getting to know him. If this were my professor, then I would be more open to developing a relationship with him. Now, obviously, the student-teacher relationship, we know from the research that's a really powerful thing. Some of the other numbers are not extremely positive. Some of the other numbers are not extremely helpful. But if you're really struggling in the area of connecting in a meaningful way, this particular style of clothing says something to students about approachability and warmth, and it may be something for you to consider. What happens though when we take that exact same style of clothing, casual top, pair of blue jeans, notice that they're a little bit tattered, wearing comfortable but slightly more stylish shoes, what does that do for the female instructor, the female professor? Again, I draw your attention to the numbers, very comparable to what we saw with the men, but also notice that the young ladies or the students would find a female professor dressed this way would be very friendly, very approachable. Again, I'm not sure I'm recommending this to you. I'm just giving you information that may be helpful for you as you make decisions. If one of the areas where you have real difficulty is connecting with students, building relationships with students, having warmth in the classroom, which is of course conducive to student learning, if that's an area where you tend to have some difficulties, then this might be something that you would consider. Because just as you commence class, just as you begin class, about 6 out of every 10, 3 out of every 5 are looking at you and going, hey, that's a friendly person. Hey, that's someone that I could get to know. Certainly not the only decision that an instructor needs to make, but one that is very important. Well, now we've really reached the heart, the best part of this presentation. I'm sorry it's taken us so long to get here, but we've reached business casual. And all of the research, not just the research that I've done, but the research that was previously presented to you, as well as all the hundreds of brothers and sisters of those research articles, seem to focus on this area. This is what I dress like when I teach. This is the way that I look. Some kind of a collared shirt, it may often say Missouri Western on it, a pair of slacks. Again, this is not my personal preference. My personal preference would be t-shirt and gym shorts. But my own study into this topic seems to give me very, very clear information. Again, this is the picture that students were shown. He's wearing an Oxford-style shirt. It's buttoned down, the collar buttons down, a nice pair of slacks, and a pair of dressier loafers or shoes. Again, we asked the students those same questions. Would this have any impact on your learning? Would this have any impact on the professor's perceived professionalism? Would this have any impact on his or her approachability, friendliness, congeniality? And the answer comes back a resounding yes in all three categories. Well, maybe not resounding in the area of learning. Now, if you've been looking at these charts as we've worked our way through this, these numbers tend to vary, but they always tend to be fairly slow. Most students don't perceive that a professor's style of clothing would have much of an impact on their learning, but notice what we see here. More than 1 out of 2, again, remember, I surveyed about 100 of the students within my own department. About 1 in 2 said, you know, if you dressed that way, it would have a positive impact on my learning. I agree, or I strongly agree, that if this were the style of clothing you were wearing, it would have a positive impression on my learning. Now, I stop right there just to say, isn't that our job? Isn't that what we do? Isn't that our whole reason for being? Student learning, student growth, student development. And so in my own life, even though I would prefer the t-shirt and gym shorts, I choose to come to class looking like this because half my students believe it has a positive impact on their learning. Notice this next number. Oddly enough, this is not the best we can dress. He's not wearing a tie. He's not wearing a jacket. And yet 80% of students say that when they see this, they see a professional individual. When they see this, they see a competent individual. When they see this, they see someone who can get the job done. That perception can be powerfully helpful for you as you go about your instruction. 8 in 10 of your students, when you wear business casual clothing, 8 in 10 of them will say, that's a professional person. And then lastly, notice that even the last set of numbers was not this high. Interestingly, when you wear business casual clothing, slightly dressier than even casual clothing, it seems counterintuitive to me, but students find you to be more approachable. They find you to be more friendly. They find you to be more congenial. They find you more welcoming, more open to relationships. 7 in 10. Assuming these numbers hold out across all departments. Of course, I don't know that they would or would not. The highlight here that I really want to draw home to you, remember that half of your students perceive that this style of clothing, if you're male, improves their learning. 80% of them perceive you to be more competent, and 70% of them perceive you to be friendlier. Isn't that worthwhile information for you to know? Just this one choice can have significantly beneficial results in terms of students' attitudes toward what you're trying to accomplish in your classroom. Well, once again, here we are with the same survey question, only this time the image was female. She's wearing a nice blouse, a nice pair of slacks, and slightly dressier shoes. We call this female business casual. Same 3 questions. If your instructor was wearing this, would you perceive her to be someone who can augment your learning? Would you perceive her to be professional? Would you perceive that she's approachable and friendly? And again, the numbers not quite as positive as they were with the male professor, but very, very close. You remember for men, the number was at 51% here, very close again at 46%. You remember the number for men here in professional was 80. For women, we're sitting at about 72. And again, the numbers here very, very similar as well. In a nutshell, ladies, if you choose to dress this way during the instruction of your courses, and again, that's entirely up to you. I'm just trying to give you a helpful tool to help you in these 3 crucial areas of your own instruction. If you start the semester this way, your students will perceive that 1 and 2 of them will say that their learning will be improved. 7 of 10 of them will believe that you're professional and that you're approachable. Good news to know. Okay, we finally reached the final set of questions. And the question is, what happens to the way students perceive your instruction and you as a professor when you dress as well as you know how to dress. When you're as formal as you can be. In my case, I'm wearing a vest and a tie and a jacket. If I chose to wear this in class, how would students respond in those three key areas? Would it improve their learning or have any impact on their learning? Would they perceive that I'm professional and competent? And would they find me to be an approachable individual? Again, on the survey, this is the picture that students were shown. A young model here wearing a tie, a suit, a pair of slacks, and of course a nice pair of dress shoes. How did students respond? Well, let's take a look at the numbers along the top. They're not extremely negative. In fact, we see that if you dress this way, about 70% of your students will go, oh yeah, that's a professional individual. But the number I really wanted to highlight for you, if you're a male professor and you dress in this fashion, notice that about a third of your students already, automatically, before you open your mouth, they're making some judgments about you and your friendliness. They're making some judgments about you and whether or not you are an approachable individual. 1/3 of those students, before you commence your instruction, they're automatically assuming that you're not extremely warm, not extremely open to what they might need from you as an instructor. Again, you'll look wonderful. You're going to look fantastic. Many of your students are going to perceive that you are incredibly professional, but a number of students, about a third of them, are really going to question whether or not you are there for them. Just something to keep in mind. And that brings us, of course, to our formally dressed or very professionally dressed female instructor. Again, here's the picture that students were shown. She's wearing a business suit, nice pair of shoes. How would students respond to her if she were the instructor? Would they strongly agree that their learning would be augmented? Would they strongly agree that she was professional? Would they strongly agree that she was approachable? These were the questions that they were asked. And again, you'll see here on the slide that I've highlighted for you that again, about 2/3 of students perceive that this female instructor is incredibly professional. When they see her dressed this way, they perceive her to be competent. She can get the job done. They have confidence that she's going to take them good places in their instruction. Again, though, I highlight for you this positive number does come with a negative number. It's not quite a third, but it's over a fourth, almost a third. Again, a large percentage of students, about a third of them, when we dress this fancily for our instruction, they're going to say, not approachable, not friendly. I disagree that this is a warm instructor that's looking out for my best interests. Another tool in your toolbox as you think about getting ready for class, as you think about preparing and presenting, think about your clothing. It has an impact on student perceptions. Well, as we conclude today, I'm wearing a traditional garment of Bangladesh. This is what all the stylish men in Bangladesh wear. The other reason I put this on is simply to say this. There were differences within my research related to race and related to gender. Just as an example, my African American students, not a large number, but my African American students did perceive that more casual professors were better for them. Again, I only mention that to say there's lots more to this question that we haven't addressed. I've simply given you the very basics related to the survey that I completed. Here are just some final numbers for you to consider. You'll notice along the top we have our styles of clothing: relaxed, casual, business casual, and formal. These are the overall positive ratings that we saw for each of those. Female instructors on the top, male instructors there on the bottom. And again, I just want to draw out to you this particular number. It's noticeably larger than the numbers around it. Students more positively respond to female instructors in business casual style clothing. It was a 62% overall rating, which is noticeably higher than the 38% for casual, noticeably higher than the 48% for formal. When we come down to the men, we see the same kind of thing. About 2/3 of students were positively responding to their male instructors in business casual. That appears to be the preferred choice of students, although I will highlight for you as well that about 60% of students were okay with their male professors wearing a nice t-shirt, nice pair of jeans, and then Chuck Taylors. And finally, friends, just 3 quick summary statements. You won't be able to read them well, but I will put it on as a slide as we conclude our training today. But first of all, students will tell you that they don't care what you wear. I asked the question repeatedly of my students, and repeatedly they said, Dr. Shepard, wear whatever you want. We don't care. It's all good. But when I surveyed them, their survey responses were very different than their verbal responses, leading me to believe that when we strip away what people think we might want to hear and they start responding to us much more openly, there is a real interest in professors looking a certain way when they instruct classes. If that's true, the question becomes, what do students want us to wear? And quite frankly, here's what we find out. If you dress too formally, students find that intimidating. If you dress too casually, students find that inappropriate. So we have to find that nice balance, and that nice balance is in that area of business casual dress. Remember, 51% of students perceive that business casual dress for a male instructor actually improves their learning. And the other areas of measurement were incredibly positive as well. They perceive you to be more professional. They perceive you to be more approachable when you wear business casual clothing. So that's my big takeaway for you today based upon my survey of 100 education department students. Again, it might be different in your department, but in our department, students want to see us teach face-to-face in business casual clothing. Thanks so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful day of online training.